Whatever you think. Yeah, and I can tell him later to actually insert it. Tell the silver to insert it.
It's because I wanted to just see the house.
But you wanted to give it away. And so you wanted like extra credit. Not enough that you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to last year
Easier, yeah? Perfect. Someone who was to us, Baruch Adonai, Noisei, Natera. Elu dvarim she'elam she'elam Karen kayames le'elam haba. Vergessen schreiben. Vergessen schreiben. Shigadavid.
Yeah.
How was Terach?
I made sure to stay till the end because I'll be snitching on people and he's telling people I'm leaving early.
Shabbos, man.
I didn't know what he was snitching about. Shabbos the doctor, he was on the.
He's upset about the. He told me that the Chevra come late.
Yeah.
I said, I understand. I don't know what. I mean, what am I supposed to do? It was just not sustainable. Guys, the daven was sick in Mela, but the Chevra who daven after,
Yeah.
they have guests. They got a guest who was just not together. I didn't have a choice. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Works for me.
But you said you're with your child, no?
Yeah, that's my child anyway.
So anyway.
Lobby.
I made notes yesterday and it's not showing up. Whatever, that's why I'm. No. I made notes. But okay, all right. Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome. Bruchim Abayim. Good morning and a good chodesh. Mishalichnas Adam Marbim B'Simcha. According to many, is also other Rishon, not only other Sheni. It says in Svarim that you have now 60 days of joy. In Halacha we have a concept called Bittul B'Shishim, meaning if a drop of milk falls into your cholent, and there's a ratio of 60 to 1, right? So the forbidden substance becomes nullified in the 60. So it says al derech harem is that the 60 days of other to others is mavatal all negativity and toxicity and trauma and fear and pain can get bottled in the 60 days of the simcha of Chodesh Adar. So I want to bless you that we should all have the courage to be able to seize the opportunity and be mevatel b'shishim, whatever you have to be mevatel b'shishim. Just throw it into the to the pot of the 60, and it will get subsumed, nullified, bottled. Huh? In a few moments, don't worry. Be careful what you ask for. But yeah, it's always good to sing without, and even more to sing inside, to sing within. Okay. So let's summarize very briefly what we started to learn. It's a very fascinating Gemara. The Masechta Saita Daf Hey, Amar Aleph, Saita 5a. The Talmud Chacham Tzarech Sheyehei Boi Shminis Shebeshminis. A student of Torah, or as he puts it, a Talmud of Chachma, a student of real wisdom, should possess an eighth of haughtiness, of pride, of what's called in Lashon Kodesh Gasas Haruach, a certain form of, I don't like the word arrogance, but haughtiness or pride. And the Chiddush of the Gemara is, as the Gemara puts it there, that this haughtiness crowns him, it decorates him, like the husk decorates the kernel. Like the sasa means literally a beard. The beard decorates the shiboilus, the stalk of wheat, and the kernel inside of it. The beard decorates the kernel inside of it. It protects it, it covers it, it crowns it inside. It's called skan. I told you Rashi brings skan hashiboilus, the beard of the shiboilus. Here you have a picture. There you have a picture. You'll see why it's called a beard. You see? It's a ganze berdel. Another picture. Another picture. That is to do PowerPoints in the olden days. Huh? Here you have the zooming in. So, huh? Yeah. The ikka is the top part, because the lower part is called the stem. The stem of the wheat is hollow inside. That becomes straw. That's what straw. When we say teven, right? This is the straw, which could be used for fuel. It was used for fuel. It could be used for animal fodder, and for similar uses. Sometimes people will plant wheat only for the straw. They're not interested in the food. But historically, and in terms of talking about human need, the top of the stalk, the stalk is called the shiboilus. The shiboilus is called the stalk. The bottom is usually hollow, not usually always. The top, you see, this contains kernels, and every one of these there's a seed, there's a kernel. And when you extract the kernel, you can then grind the kernel into what we call flour. And that becomes the source of all foods that come from flour, wheat flour. Bread, cake, mezainis, hamaitzi, etc. So this is called the moitz. Moitz means the chaff. The chaff is the klipa, the husk around it. Particularly, if you see here, it's like, they call it in English a bristle, I think. Bristle, right? The stalk of wheat has a bristle around it. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, bristle. B-R-I-S-T-L-E. You're an English teacher.
Yeah, I know.
And you're wearing a vest. You're a farmer.
And you're wearing a vest, yeah.
And I drove this one.
I believe it's a bristle. It's like, you know what they are? You know these brushes, sometimes brushes with which you wipe down parts of the house, they're made out of material, they call it bristle. So it's a pretty tough material around it. It's called bristle, and it's stiff. It's pretty tough. This is called the beard. You see here, there's hairs around it. That's why they called it skan hashiboilus, the beard of the stalk of wheat. And then you have the chaff, and inside you have, in each one of these, you have a kernel, you have a seed, which is the tachlis. That's the chita itself. And inside of it, you have primarily the kernel itself has different parts. The greatest part is called the endosperm, I think, from which we have our white flour. Huh? Our white flour and everything that comes with gluten, latoiv, yeah, or lamutav sometimes.
When you're saying that the straw is the extraneous part and the beard is the more important part, is there any deeper meaning to when Paro restricted the straw?
Oh, of course. Would you expect otherwise?
Now for sure we're not going to get to this.
In Tanakh, you're asking about the straw of Parai and the Jewish people. There's a lot of significance to that. The significance to the fact, if you remember, that Esav asked his father, when Chazal say that Esav deceived his father, what would he ask him? Keitzad ma'asrin, es hamelach ve'es hateven. How do you give tithe? How do you give meiser from salt and from straw? This is what he was talking about. Okay, now, let's remember the process. So when the Gemara says, when you want to understand haughtiness, you have to study the beard of the stalk. The haughtiness is the beard of the stalk. It's basically the husk, the mites, the chaff around the kernel. Sometimes it's called mites, it's called chaff, it's called sasa in Aramaic, which means the beard, because particularly on top you have these beards. It's like the hair that flows. It's pretty tough. It's pretty stiff. The bristle, huh? Kemoitz asher titfenu ruach, a pasuk in Tehillim. Kemoitz asher titfenu ruach means like chaff, which the wind casts away, because since it's much lighter than the kernel. So when you throw it up into the wind, or even you put it in front of a fan, today a lot of people use fans, you put it in front of a fan, right? It will blow away the lighter part and separate it. Kamoitz, like the chaff, it's very light, that the ruach, the wind, casts away. So the question the Balatanya wants to know is, why did Chazal bring this mashal? What are they out to explain to us? You could think they want to give a metaphor. So there's two things. First of all, they don't give metaphors to be entertaining. When they gave a parable or a metaphor, it was in order to elucidate the idea. It was in order, like we learned in the Maimah via Daita Moskva, to bring down the oil. The mashal was a lavush in order to bring out, to illustrate, to concretize the idea that it should be understood by the human brain. So therefore, the question would be, what do we gain from this metaphor? Like, what is the metaphor teaching us? If it's just a case where there's a garment around that protects, so why do they find the beard of the beard of the stalk, the beard of the stalk of wheat? You could talk about every person wearing garments, and inside there's a body. You have to say there's a psatoichin, there's some depth that they're trying to convey through the mashal. And that was the focus. Now, in order to understand this, so here you have a wheat field. You can see the wheat field. Here we just zoomed in. You should be able to see the individual process. What happens? The first thing that happens is, this is very important also, as I mentioned, for Hilchas Shabbos, because all the malachas of Shabbos revolve around, the first 11 malachas revolve around this process. The first thing you have to do is plant. If you don't plant, it can't happen. For to plant, you have to plow. Those are the first two malachas, Chayrish and Zayreya. I know it says Zayreya and Chayrish, but the Gemara wants to know why it says Zayreya and Chayrish. First you have to have Chayrish and Zayreya. So the Gemara says that in certain soils, you have to plow, and then plant, and then you have to plow again. So that's why. But since I wasn't getting into it, we're not learning Masechta Shabbos now, so I just said plowing and planting. But I know the order of the Mishnah. You did. You made a comment, which was a good comment. I don't mind your comment. Adirab, a very good comment. Don't feel bad that you made the comment. It's Say the Gemara. All comments are welcome, even if they don't make sense. Certainly in your case, it made a lot of sense. All the comments make sense in their own context. So the first thing is you got to plow and you got to plant. Then it grows. After it grows, what happens? After it grows, you have to harvest. That's called kaitzer, you harvest. So you harvest a bunch of these. Now you're not going to deal with each one separate. It can take you a year. So you do ma'amer, you do bundles. People don't realize when they learn the malachas of Shabbos, they don't realize the logic because they were never in farms or fields. Even children, when they learn Mishnayos, they're sitting in a building somewhere in Borough Park or in Brooklyn, they never saw wheat. That's why it's important to see the reality and then it becomes alive. You can understand it much better. So even these Maimonides, people learn that you have to understand the reality. If not, if you don't understand the outside, you can't understand the inside. You have to push it, see the mashal. What happens after harvesting? You make piles. You bring them together. It's called ma'amer. Now comes one of the most important processes, and this is called disha, threshing. What is threshing? You could do it with your hand. You could take a flail. You could take a stick. You can even take your hand. You start punching it, basically. Disha means punching. You start punching. What happens when you punch this? What do you think happens? This is what happens. See how professional we are today? This is what happens. You start punching. Here's the beard, and the beard got emptied out. This is the mites. The guy punched it out. There's a kernel in each one. These are all filled with kernels. They all fall out. That's what disha is. You can do it with your hand, you can do it with a stick, you can do it with a broom, you can do it with a flail, as people do. You can do it with your feet. The classic case of threshing when you had a big farm or field was with animals. You took animals and you had them go around and around, just stepping on it, and stepping on it. When you step on it, you extract, by definition, automatically you extract the seeds, the kernels, which is the pneumius, from the mites, from the chaff. However, this is not complete yet. Why? Because this is it's still superficial. You have to go to step 2. The chaff is still mixed in everywhere. The kernels are here, but there is still psilus inside of them. The here is then what we're calling here. The bristle husks are there and pieces of the chaff. So you have the next step. They would put it something today. They'll put it in front of a fan. I mean today if it's a big company, you'll have machines already. They would winnow it, throw it up, and that's where it says k'moitz ruach titfenu. And the ear does the job of separating, so the kernels fall back down, and the chaff flies away. Sometimes people should do it in front of a fan, and the chaff goes away. That's the next step that's forbidden on Shabbos. It's called zoyre. So you have kaitzer. I hope you'll remember this because I'm trying to explain the logic. You harvest, you make sheaves, bundles, you thresh, dosh, and zoyre, you winnow. When your child comes home with Mishnayos, Masechta Shabbos, Perek Zayin, you'll be able to help them, or your grandchild, or yourself. We always talk about the children. It's better projection. Zoyre is winnowing. That's what zoyre is. Winnow means you throw it into there. So now you have the kernels. Great. You have the kernels. We're ready. No. The kernels are still usually mixed with stuff. Because you have pebbles, you have dirt, so now you have boirer. This is the classic case of boirer. What's boirer? You select, you separate, boirer. The word birur, borur, it's all the same idea. Avodas habirurim, right? You have to do birurim. You have to clarify, crystallize, separate, remove the dirt, remove the psilus. That's also forbidden on Shabbos. Every one of these is forbidden on Shabbos because this is the process of work, the main work of agriculture. What happens after boirer? After boirer, now you have kernels. Now you're good. So what do? You make a pile, you bring them together. You can have 1,000 kernels, 10,000 kernels. You make a mountain, and then you do one last thing. You smooth it out. That's called miruach hakeri. Memareach miruach. You smooth it out. It should be nice and organized. You don't want kernels all over the place. You bring it together. You make it nice. This is called gemar malach. You finish the work. You didn't do the baking yet. You didn't do the grinding yet, but you finished what's called processing of the wheat. From wheat to kernels, you're done. Now you're good. Once this happens in halacha, the status changes. It's now mechuyev in trumas and meisers. You're now obligated to give tithes. Chazal learned this out. It says, reishis degoncha. You have to give truma tithing from the beginning of degoncha means your grain. Dagon is grain. But from when mishaz digunai, from when it's complete and smoothed out. Because that's Gemar Malacha, that's when it's done. Memareach. Yeah. Then comes you want bread. You need bread. So then comes the next step. You'll take a pile of kernels, you'll grind them, you'll put them in the mill, or however you grind them. Usually a mill, you need something to grind them, and basically they develop into flour. You have flour. Once you have flour, you'll do again boirer. You'll sift the flour. That's called meraked. That's the next malacha. After you grind it into flour, you want to sift the flour because the flour can also have in it psoilus. So you sift the flour. Now you have clean flour. What's the next step? Lush. Now you knead the flour with water. That's also a malacha. And what's the next step? You have a dough. What do you do with the dough? You bake it. Oife. That's it. Finished. And that finishes the whole section of the first 11 malachas of Shabbos. Clear, yeah? So this is the step of disha of threshing. Comes Esav. And what does Esav say? Keitzad ma'asrin es hamelech ves hateven. How do you give meiser from straw? And Yitzchak is like, wow, he's a special boy. What's so special about this question? Everybody can ask how you give meiser from straw. What's special about it is that straw is potter for meiser. Straw is exempt for meiser. Why? Because anything that's not edible for people is potter for meiser. If it's just an animal food, or it's used for another purpose, not for food, it's exempt for meiser. So as a result of that, you're not mechuyev to give meiser from Tevin. You can have a lot of straw. You don't have to separate any of it and give it to the Kohen or the Levi or the poor person in Yerushalayim. But Esav was so frum. Esav was so holy. He was so religious. He's like, how do you give meiser from straw? As the Mefarshim ask an interesting question. Yitzchak should have said Esav. You never learned that you don't give meiser from straw. Instead of being impressive, really, you would think it would be unimpressive. How do you know that you don't give meiser from straw? He didn't say, do you give? He said, how do you give meiser from straw? Okay, it's a separate sugya.
Or he could say there's no mitzvah to give room.
Before Matan Torah, yeah. So now what happens is, so Tevin is potter for meiser. What's mechuyev in meiser? The kernels. But when? Only after you remove the moitz, after you remove the beard and everything. So what do we have from here? What's the conclusion? These are the facts that every farmer knows, and the Alter Rebbe points them out briefly. The facts of life as they relate to stalks of wheat, and all grain according to its own structure. Here we're talking about wheat. What's the purpose of the beard? What's the purpose of the stiff bristle? What's the purpose of the husk around the kernel? And the answer is because in order to grow and develop, we want the seeds, we want the kernels. What do we need? The kernel requires sunlight, and the kernel requires rain. You have to have, of course, soil, carbon, sunlight, and rain. The problem is that sunlight and rain are also it's the greatest threats to its survival. You need sunlight. Without sunlight, you're not going to have the whole process of photosynthesis. You're not going to be able to grow. Without rain, it won't have the basic nutrients it needs to develop. But if the kernel was exposed, if the Rebbeinu Shalom would have made that the stalk grew, and you wouldn't have to go through, this is not an easy process. We go to the store today, we buy bread. It's not how it used to work. So we don't even know the people that do it. Nobody even knows. We don't appreciate the process. Today you have the end result. You don't appreciate what it takes. But if the kernels were exposed to the sources of its own nourishment, what would happen? It would be scorched by the heat. It would be burnt and destroyed by the intensity of the heat. of the sunlight, and it would rot as a result of the abundant moisture and rain falling on it. Hence, Mother Nature, coming from Mother God, has given us the husk. What's the husk? The husk is rough, it's tough, it's a hard shell which encases, it protects, and it stands as a cover for the kernel. Or in the case of fruit, as he says, it's the klipa, the shell that protects the fruit. And what does that husk do? It bears the brunt of the sun's rays. So the brunt of the heat hits the kernel, hits the husk instead of the kernel. And the kernel has, as we would say in English, thick skin. That's what he's made for. What else does he do? The husk also deflects the drops of water falling from the sky, falling from above. The kernel would take it all in and it would rot. When you have the husk, it takes the brunt of the heat, of the sun rays, and it deflects the water that falls on it. So the husk shields the kernel from the sun and rain, but not completely, while absorbing enough energy and moisture to sustain it and fuel its growth. It doesn't get rid of the sun and get rid of the water, but rather it gets enough. It gets enough sunlight, and that's why every one of these growths needs its leaves, which are usually the absorbance of the sunlight, and channeling enough in order to be able to sustain its growth. Then comes the day of harvest. What happens on the day of harvest? You have koitzer, the grain has ripened, or the fruit has matured, and now it's fit to fulfill its function as food. It became ripe, or as fodder, or as seed, whatever the nature of the growth is. Now the husk is not an asset. Now the husk is a blocker. Now the husk is an impediment. If you say, I want the moitz now, you're not allowing yourself to get to the next process. Therefore, it's broken open, it's peeled off, and it's discarded. Sometimes these things fall off on their own parts. Rashi says in Saitit that the skana shebelis falls off on its own. Sometimes you have to beat it, and that's what we spoke about, threshing and winnowing, etc., but that's all the process. And only after that will it become mechuyev in Meiser. Why? Why? And we understand why. Meiser represents something that's the tachlis of it, the food. Till then, it's not yet edible, so therefore there's no chiyuv Meiser. So Meiser can only happen after the moitz is removed, after Gemar Malach. The Alter Rebbe wanted to understand, how could you dismiss the beard of the stalk so easily? How could you discard it? How could you turn it into psoilus when it was the key of survival? It was the only way you survived. It was the hype mechutin, as they would say in Yiddish. It was everything. How do you now call it toffel, subservient, irrelevant, psoilus, even garbage? Psoilus means garbage. How do we have the audacity to do that? And his answer is, you have to look at stages. Timing is of essence. It's always about timing. When the kernel was busy developing and maturing, then to discard the chaff would mean what? It would mean destroying it, sentencing it to death, sentencing the growth to death. Not only is it an accessory, it's nice, it's extra credit, it's essential, it's vital. Why? Because of the forces of nature would destroy it, scorch it, destroy it, rot it, cause it to decay and decompose, and it would never have a chance to become what we want it to become. That's stage one. And that's when it's extremely essential, it's critical, it's indispensable, it's vital. It's vital to survival. However, once it's ripe, once it developed, once it became what it has to become, now to leave it on and say, look how beautiful, this is your crown, this is your decoration, this is your key for survival, you're actually impeding it. You're actually not allowing a person to benefit from the great purpose of why we planted the wheat or any grain or any tree or any legume seed initially. And those two stages are critical to understand. In other words, what in one stage is survival and life, the key to life, in another stage becomes what? Becomes a klipa. It becomes a shell and a husk that's made to be discarded. On the contrary, it invites itself to be discarded. It looks at you and says, hey, Rabbi, I've done my job. Have a good day. The Shatchin after the chuppah. I've done my job. Let's go to the next couple or potential couple. I've done. Now it's time to say goodbye. And that's what happens to the mites. It's always about stages. It's always about timing. Based on this introduction, we could now understand a little bit of the depth of the mashal. Why Chazal talk about haughtiness, and they say a student of Torah has to have an eighth of an eighth, a Talmid Chacham have an eighth of an eighth of pride. We don't just say an eighth of an eighth. We say it should decorate him. Ma'atrele, it's like an ateris, a crown. It's a decoration. Kisasa l'shabulta, like the beard to the like the beard to the stalk, like the husk to the kernel, like the chaff to the wheat. Kisasa l'shabulta. Now we'll understand they weren't just giving a mashal. They were actually conveying the essence of it. And here we come to Perek Gimel of the Maimer, Vayikach Haman. And this is unique, and I'm going to say this as an intro. I want to learn in sub, but I want to say one word as an intro. One of the great tensions that people often experience is, what is the relationship between the self-confidence, let's call it the tension between self-confidence and religion. For very many people, somehow, the way they processed religion or faith or Judaism or Emunah or Yiddishkeit, whatever the name is, was as something that in their own experience and their own psyche and their own perception completely delegitimized their own identity. Whether it was their own way of understanding things, whether it was the way things were communicated to them, whether it was parenting or schooling or community or culture or different personal experiences. But in their mind, there is either you serve God or you serve yourself. And they were taught, what does it mean to serve God? To serve God means that you don't exist. And the more you don't exist, the better Jew you can be. In other words, the more you know how to beat yourself up, the more you know how to look in the mirror and say, you see this thing? This thing is nothing. This thing is really valueless. Then the closer you can get to truth. Because what's the worst thing in life? The ego, the arrogance, the haughtiness, the hedonism, the narcissism, the self-centeredness. And this is true within the entire Jewish world, I think. And generally the entire world. What's the relationship between self-confidence and duty, responsibility? What's the relationship between who I am and what my calling is? To be or not to be, that is the question. Or to be not, that is the question. Particularly those who have tasted, either superficially or even more in depth, the language, the jargon of the world of Machshava and Chassidus, where there is a very charged term that's always used, and it's called bittul. Very good. Bittul. And everybody knows what's bittul. The translation of bittul in all the English translations is self-nullification. Right? It's one of the first English words we had to learn. Self-nullification. What self-nullification? Nobody still knows what self-nullification is. But it sounds like bittul. Or the concept is nullify. Nullify means to make it nothing. Obliterate it. The more bittul, we always say, the closer to God. The more bittul, the closer to truth. In other words, the more nothing, the better. The less nothing, the worse. Like chametz, bittul chametz. What's bittul chametz? You say it's ka'afredar, it's like offer. Really, we would like it to be less than offer, but it's for it to exist, so we use it offer. The Rambam has a lashon kedavar she'im b'yitzorich klal in Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah. What's bittul? Ka'afredar mamish, it becomes offer. The Rishonim say that because you look at it like offer, it becomes offer in terms of halacha. Augmented reality. You look at it like offer, it becomes offer. So if you look at yourself like offer, you'll take a become offer. And by chametz, it doesn't always work. By people, somehow it works. By chametz, the Chazal were afraid it's not going to be b'leiv shalom. You're not going to mean it. It's fart a nice bottle of brandy, and it's not really offer. It's fart, and that's why they made you do bdika and beer. But by people, somehow it works very well. If you tell yourself you're like offer, you take a become like offer.
That's why the dafka honor pizza because they have to clean the house and wipe every day.
Your wife says, you're saying your wife reinforces the message. Okay, some husbands also reinforce the message. I told you once, no? Rabbi Ezel Charif, the Slonim Mirav, his wife asked him Erev Pesach in the morning if he got rid of all the chametz. So he said, I got rid of all the chametz, but there's one piece of chametz that I've been married to for 40 years, I can't get rid of it. So she said, you don't have to worry. That chametz my father sold to a goy many, many years ago. Yenish tik chametz that my tata verkauft to a goy gomer. You really don't have to worry about that. This tension is not a simple tension. It's a sensitive one. It's a complex one. Now, I have spoken about it many times because it's fundamental. And I find it fundamental because I have found, teaching many years, that when people hear the words, they often misinterpret it based on their own experience. It's very rare that the very authors of these teachings should address this tension so blatantly. And probably one of the most explicit places where the Alter Rebbe addresses this tension is in this Maimer. So it's not just a Torah, it's a Taich, it's a Shir, it's a Vort, it's Mamish, the Maimer itself addresses it. And the reason I was so elaborative about the illustration, and the Alter Rebbe is so elaborate, he's usually not so elaborate about Mishalim with agriculture, because he relied that people knew what we're talking about, is because it's the mashal that conveys perfectly the nimshal here. It's very hard to see a mashal that is as perfect. It's mamish. Sometimes a mashal, it's a good illustration, right? We spoke a lot about Rav and Talmud. So it's not such a tangible mashal. For that, you have to have a good teacher and a good student. And how many people had such teachers and how many people were such students? That's why the mashal of a Rav and Talmud, for somebody who had a real Rebbe and was a real Talmud, it's a great mashal. But it's still an intangible mashal. Here, you could see it with your eyes. You could see it. So even people today with ADD and ADHD who can't understand abstract mashalim, but this is the real thing. So the mashal mamash illustrates it. And the fact that Chazal, 1700 years ago, 1800 years ago, in Gemara, or 1600 years ago, in Masechta Sotah, used this mashal to define the Shminis Shebeshminis, shows how in that mashal they were conveying this very message. What is the message? So let's see. V'hinei hanimshal siv gimel, yeah? V'hinei hanimshal mikol zeh yuvan b'avodas Hashem. The mashal we explained. The nimshal will now be understood. V'hinei mavur l'mayla b'bchinis talmid chachem shehu hamispol ba'ava v'yirah b'pnei yizbeirinus b'chachma b'chinis bittel b'pnei shayr and sev shayr b'chachma. We spoke, what is the definition of a Talmud Chacham in its epitome? We don't call him a Chacham. We call him a Talmud of Chacham. Why? He is the person, the Balatanya's description of a Talmud Chacham. HaMispal ba'ava v'yirah. He's moved by love and awe. Why? Mipnei yizbeirinus, because of his awareness. In Chachma, what does it mean, awareness of Chachma? B'chinas bittel. He's completely aware of the infinity, of the truth of infinity. Ein Sof is manifested in Chachma, in the quality of Chachma, which is the creative power that allows for an epiphany, a new flow of energy, and therefore it represents the complete openness to the person, to that which transcends him. And hence the Talmud Chacham is moved by love and awe. What then is the nimshal of the stalk, of the guf hachita? Guf hachita means the core of the chita. Guf here doesn't only mean the body, it means the guf, the etzem, the core of the chita, which is that which is inside the chita. The guf means the pnimius, like the core. What's the mashal? It would have been destroyed. It would have been burnt up. Or it would have rotted and become decayed without the mites, without the chaff. What is this? In Yenu, the Anuroyim we see, Shekol Misha Maschil Ba'avodas Hashem, any person who begins serving Hashem, Ba'avodas Shebelev Zutfila, and the beginning of Avodas Hashem is always Ba'avodas Shebelev Zutfila. The Gemara says in Tainus, Ula Avdoi B'chalav Avchem, Ezo Avodas Shebelev Zutfila. Tefillah davening is called an avodah shebelev. Why is it called avodah shebelev? Avodah shebelev means in Herzen und mitten Herzen. It's an avodah in the heart and with the heart. But anybody who begins a real relationship with God, what is a real relationship? Real relationship with God doesn't mean talk, conversation. It doesn't only mean ritual. It starts off with avodah shebelev zu tefillah. It starts off expressed in a relationship of davening. What do we mean here by davening? We're not saying just a person goes through words. Avodah shebelev, avodah with the heart and in the heart. Anyone who starts, efshaloi. It's impossible to start avodas Hashem. I have to say these are incredibly unique words. Efshaloi, bilti yemtsos midos hagasos. You can't begin avodas Hashem if there's no sense of I. If there's no sense of what he calls in midas hagasus, which is a very coarse expression. Midas hagasus means the attribute of gasus. Gasus literally means coarseness, haughtiness, what we would call egotism. Gasa ruach is a thick spirit, a dense ruach. It's dense, it's thick. Midas hagasus. Pshat, what do I mean? Why are you saying this? Doesn't avodas Hashem mean you're serving Hashem? Not arrogant. He says, I don't mean you're arrogant in the sense that you're a narcissist. That's not avodas Hashem. That's narcissistic personality disorder, or hedonism, or selfishness. What do we mean by gasas? He explains. The person has to experience himself, make himself, understand himself as a yesh. Yesh means something. Davar ma means an existence. Why? To be able to tell himself that this is what I need. In other words, there's an I who has needs. There's an I who is looking for something. V'yesh mi she'ovet. And there's somebody who's serving. The relationship is valuable. There's somebody here. There's somebody here. Who is that person? Me. Chuli, v'chuli, etc. In other words, there's a lot to elaborate. Ubeniyas ha'avodah yetzer lo. Preventing himself from avodas Hashem is going to bother him. Why is it going to bother him? Mipnei she'enei chafetz liyas nifred. I don't want to be separated. I don't want to be gypped from life. I don't want to be deprived of something so meaningful, of something so valuable. Einei chafetz liyas nifred. In other words, in simple English, I see my life as valuable, and therefore I want to suck the marrow out of my life. I want to actualize myself. I want to be the ultimate person who I am. I want to live my life to the fullest. I don't want to be separated. I don't want to be detached. I don't want to be empty. I don't want to live an empty life. I want to live the best life possible. I want to actualize myself. If you don't have value, if you don't think that you have value, all these equations can't come into the picture. So this is a very deep underlying premise that fuels the beginning of avodas Hashem. Hagam shezel b'chefetz v'ratzon amiti. Now this could be with true desire, a true desire. Shechafetz b'kirvas Hashem v'einei reitzel l'srachik. Apparently, this is a very, very deep. He really wants to be close and doesn't want to be far from Hashem. Mikol makom yesh b'seh b'chinas gasus. This is called gasus. It's called haughtiness. Why? Ki nechshev be'einav le'ezeh davar. Because he's considered in his own lives, he's considered as something significant. Sheba avodah yiskarif. He actually believes that his life can do something. There's something real here. It's a relationship. Imagine somebody is proposing, wants to get engaged, met somebody, so they propose, right? The night before engagement, they go out to, I don't know, wherever they go out, And this person wants to propose. And says, before he says, I have to give an introduction. I'm nothing. I'm valueless. What I do means nothing. What I say means nothing. I'm an absolutely nobody. I'm sick. I'm dysfunctional. I should have been dead years ago. There's nothing to me. There's nothing significant about me. Would you like to marry me? There's something off, right? You say, why? It's a beautiful thing. The guy has no ego. He's not going to be narcissistic. Whatever she wants, he's going to do. The greatest thing she should say, of course I want to marry you. But you'll see she's going to come home to her mommy and say, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? What's wrong with this? The best bittel in the world. I got no needs. I don't even exist. I barely exist. I was told I don't exist, and it's true. It looks like I exist in the pictures, but there's nothing there really. You call the shots, you tell me, I'm a robot. I'm the best in the world. I'm a chaya. No issues with ego, no issues with pride, no issues with arrogance. He's never going to disagree. It's a dream of every wife, no? Huh? Oh, yeah. What type of experiencing are you having? We should talk. Or the wife tells the husband, I would love to marry you, I just have to tell you something about me. I mean, not the husband yet, the potential chassan. I'm nothing, I'm not even sure I exist. The best thing, wonderful. It's like being married to yourself. Shalom bayis, it's perfect, you get a tax discount, even though you never fight, it's beautiful. But everybody understands everybody's going to run away from this. Why are you going to run away from this? Anybody wants to answer the question? Huh? There's no relationship. You can't have a relationship with nothing. Avoid if a person really believes, I don't matter, I'm a shmata, and all the trauma I existed confirms the authentic truth. Ich bin a garnished, mit noch a garnished, I'm a big zero. And as somebody once told me, that somebody once told him, as a child, he said, you're a zero. As many zeros as you'll add, you're always adding zeros and zeros and zeros, and the beginning is always a zero. And what your add will always just add up to more zeros, and you can have 1,000 zeros, and it's not less zero than 1 zero. In other words, I'm building what we would call a castle out of sand, the house of cards. There's nobody here, there's nothing here. So it doesn't mean avodas Hashem. Avodas Hashem means I'm serving. That means there's value to it. Something is happening. There's a relationship. You care about it. I'm bringing something to the table. There's an I that is valuable. The Alter Rebbe calls this gasus. We're not talking narcissism. Relationship. A relationship requires that there's an I. Nechshav be'einav leizer davar. He looks at himself as something. Shabavoidasa yiskarev. Through my avodah, I'm going to get close. There's something valuable. And next, v'yil anachas ruach l'mayla, and God cares. He wants it. Avodas Hashem means it's anachas ruach. Anachas ruach means he enjoys it, he appreciates it. My existence means something. My decisions mean something. My life means something. That's the genesis of all avodas Hashem. My life doesn't mean anything. If I'm a shmata, he says you can't begin avodas Hashem. There's nothing here. Nobody here. Just a traumatized robot. A lifeless corpse. A dead man walking. There's a word from the Kotzker Rebbe. So a very powerful idea. He said, Vazei rufen prikas oil ruf ich atzvos. What many people call prikasal, what does prikasal mean? You remove the yoke of God, you're a frivolous, promiscuous person. I call depression. Prikasal, I don't want God, don't tell me what to do, I'm a free person. I'm a depressed person. I want to sleep all day. I don't want to do anything. Don't tell me. I don't see real value in my life. If I don't see real value in my life, let me just... So now you want me... I should restrict myself.
What if it's an opposite type of value? Let's say a billionaire. He has a lot of value. But he's...
Okay.
That's your relationships.
Fine. That's the opposite. That's the opposite. But really, you're asking a person who has a lot of value but no relationships. They've just become a self-centered, isolated egomaniac. It's really the same thing. It's really the same thing. The depth of arrogance is usually the depth of insecurity. Usually the depth of arrogance is the depth of insecurity. Huh? You're asking a good question. Why would God need that? Okay. But for some odd, crazy reason, he created this world. So he was looking for something. However you have to explain this. Yeah. He wanted it. I didn't force him to create the world, and my mother-in-law also didn't.
So actually, you could call this...
But he wanted it. He wanted it. The whole Chumash, if you read Chumash with this perspective, whenever God says, if you don't, this, what you have to hear in it is, wow, I mean a lot to this God. Like, what? It matters. Baruch, well, I don't understand. If you're as big as they make you, first of all, relax. The basis of all of Judaism is that your life has some extraordinary value. Not just value to another person whom you can support. Value to the source of all reality, which is surprising. It's like, really? You have nothing better to do than have a relationship with me? But if I don't have that, that's what we call atzvos. It's a form of sadness, which a lot of people have in a very deep way. They may not walk around sad, but deep down, their lives don't really matter. Their lives are insignificant. Huh? And I feel that my avodah can change me. Something is happening with me. And there's an achas ruach. Ubehepech. And then I could feel the opposite also. Without avodah, there's a distance, there's a pain, there's something missing. There's the opposite of nachas ruach. And again, I'm going to use the metaphor of a marriage. Both ways. If a husband tells a wife, or a wife tells a husband before they get married, I want to tell you something about me. There's nothing you can do that will insult me. Nothing. You know why? I don't need you. I don't need you. I'm perfect without you. So why are you here in my house? I'm pashat nice. I'm pashat a nice guy. But I darf garnish nothing. A husband, wow, best marriage in the world. Can leave whenever you want, come whenever you want. But there's something off about it, right? There's something off about it. Why? I'm free. I'm free. It means there's no relationship. You can't affect me. On the other hand, if somebody says, whatever you do will never be enough. People do that. Well, never, there's just nothing. It's like pouring water into a bottomless bucket. I can tell you 1,000 times I love you. Nothing goes in. You know why? There's no floor. There's no foundation. Pour and pour and pour and pour goes right out. If the core of self is not there, you could pour and pour and pour and pour, and nothing stays. Why? There's nothing there. When you say, I love you, I don't believe there's a you. I don't believe I exist. That means when you're saying I love you, you can't mean it, because you also know that I don't exist. That means you're lying to me, so now I hate you even more. Which is why sometimes the people who are kindest to us become our greatest enemies. Because we can't believe what they're saying is true. Because I'm such a nobody, it's impossible that you love me. And if you love me, you're really bad. I can't trust you. You really make bad decisions. You're manipulating me. You just want, so you want my money because I have a Yerusha. And that's it, and we cut off relationships. Why? Because I'm processing everything through dysfunctional thoughts. Which is normal, by the way, as long as you identify it. As long as you can laugh at yourself and say, wow, that's funny. Person came to me, tried to help me, and they became a criminal in my own eyes. As long as you can identify it and then laugh and say, I'm pretty traumatized, then you're good. Then you're good. Then you're doing boider. That's what boider is. We always speak about boider. Boider is, you identify. This is psilus, this is not. This typhus, good stuff, yeah? The basis of life, the basics of life. You wonder why they didn't tell this to you when you were 6? Huh? What'd they tell you the opposite? However we define the need, it's an important shir. What does it mean Hashem needs? But the words he uses is l'nachas ruach l'mayla. It's cherished. It's cherished. He created a world. However we understand and explain. He says, this is the haschala of all avodas Hashem. There's no avodas Hashem without this haschala. Yud Shvat. In other words, if there's no tzuras Adam, if you're not an Adam, if there's no tzuras Adam, if you don't look at Moida ani lefanecha, Moida ani lefanecha. I start with Moida, but who's Moida? Ani. If the Ani is a shmata, piece of garbage, a lowlife, a piece of filth, stay in bed. That's what people do. They stay in bed. So the Poitical, you're Poitical. There's cuts because you're not a Poitical. You're depressed. Wrong diagnosis. Poitical, you're staying in bed. He's not a Poitical. He's depressed. There's nobody to get up. Who do you want should get up from bed? You need somebody to get up bed. You want the mattress to stand up? You want the mattress to have Tchiyas HaMesim? He's part of the mattress. You know, some people, they click onto the mattress. They become the chefs of the mattress. Who do you want should get out of bed? The mattress? He became a mattress. That's what he is. That's not prikas oil. It's atzvos. And if you don't address it, you're not addressing what's going on. There's nobody to get up. Who should get up? A loser? Why should a loser get up? To lose again? You don't stand up to lose. You stand up to win. You have to win. You have to lose as a winner, not as a loser. You understand what I'm saying? The antidote to atzvus is to come to these shiurim. Okay. Huh? Huh? Yes, 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 yes. Huh?